I'm Richard, Titus. He's Steven, just so you don't get confused. And we're sitting because I broke my foot 2 days ago in New York, so sorry about that. So let's talk a little bit about human-computer interfaces. First question, what was your first computer?
First computer. I had a Windows, not even 95, it was before that, Windows 3.1, what it was called. Back in the day, like IBM clone in my parents' basement. I remember playing, not even playing, like playing with the command prompt. I thought it was really cool as a kid when I could actually do something with that. And I think before I could probably write, I was typing on that computer in the basement.
So did you learn to type before you learned to work on a computer, or did the computer teach you to type?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I have no idea.
So, but typing for you is just like part of how you communicated with technology.
Yeah, it's in the same way that we grew up today, and I watch a daughter who's 20 months, and I watch her grab my phone off the table and open up applications like she knows what she's doing, and open YouTube and click on buttons like it's just a touchscreen is just something, an extension of the human abilities. And as a kid, obviously typing was the same thing. I'm sure she won't type going forward.
This is actually kind of interesting. We were talking on the phone today, this morning, prepping for the session, and I asked him the question, like, so for me, the mouse and the keyboard were the principal ways I interacted with technology. I sort of view voice assistants with suspicion, but my children, they don't know how to type. They only use their voice to interact with their phones. That's their principal interface. What's going to be the principal interface of our grandchildren, do you think?
I think the power and really the reason we started working on our product on glasses was this idea of how do we take these amazing parts we get from technology, the power we get today, the access to information, the communications, these amazing abilities the last 3 decades, 4 decades of evolution have given us, but how do we do it in a way that as we go forward, we don't end up in this Ready Player One dystopian future of spending our time like cut off from the world, missing out on what's in front of us. And so what we believe is how do we take those great abilities from technology but make it a seamless part of the world around us. And so when we think about the interface of the future, it's almost an invisible interface. It's really how do we take technology instead of it being an object, it being a device, it being a screen, make it a seamless part of our world, there when you need it, gone when you don't. And so for us, working on Focals was sort of the very first step in that direction of really taking technology, making it invisible, and making it there to support us in the real world instead of us being kind of a slave to these devices around us.
So this is really interesting, right? So like, we've all seen movies with various interfaces. Some make sense.
Some made by you, perhaps.
Yeah. So yeah, he's joking. A firm I was involved in, Schematic, that I co-founded. My partner and I did some work for Steven Spielberg, developing some of the interfaces you saw in Minority Report. And the brief that we were given in some other forums, many of those people, there's like 20 people out there talking about working on Minority Report. Most of them worked for me at some point. But what's interesting is the brief was, tell me how the interface will be in the future, and you can't use a keyboard or a mouse. And so, you saw physical interfaces, gestural, language. But what's interesting to me is all of those were explicit interfaces. And when we were talking on the phone, I was really intrigued by this idea of implicit interfaces. Like, so to me, the goal of a computer-human interface is for the computer to do what I want or to help me achieve my other goal. So the computer is not the goal, it's a tool. And so often as engineers, we're focused on the tools, not the products. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we think of today this idea of intent in action, right? I want to do something. It might be as simple as I want to look up this cafe across the street and find out if they have good food and if I should go there or not. And of course, we can do that today. We pull out a device, open up maybe Yelp, search for the place, look up the reviews, find out what we need, intent in action. The vision we have is in the future, as computing understands more about what we're trying to do in the world, has more context. Imagine a computer that can see what you can see, understand what you're doing in the world, what you want to achieve. How do you reduce that time between the intent, I want to do something, and I actually do it? And so interface of the future will not be today where it's prescriptive. We explicitly say, and we put in the computer what I am trying to do and get an answer back. It'll be the computer understanding what you're doing and feeding you the information seamlessly as you need it. And so really changing that time between intent and action and making it a implicit part of the world in front of us. There when you need it, gone when you don't.
So when you think about North products today, are they principally the interface for receiving information, or are you also ingesting information? And why is that important?
The area we're in today is we call it smart glasses. Basically a computer, so I'm wearing a pair of glasses today, this is projecting an image directly on the back of my eye. I have a screen floating 3 feet in front of me right here. None of you can see that. I can see it by clicking a button here, it's up. But this idea of smart glasses is the very first version that we launched this year. But where this goes in the long term is really understanding what you are doing in the world. And there's a lot you can understand, both outward-facing and inward-facing. So outward-facing, imagine in the future you have sensors, cameras, et cetera, and with the advances we've had in computer vision, for example, fully understanding what is in front of you in the world is very achievable on a device like this in the next couple of years. Inward-facing, we can do things like eye tracking and sensors and understand the internal state of the person. So what are you feeling right now? Are you tired? What are you looking at? What's interesting to you? The amount of context and information we have, we think of what's been possible because of our cell phones today. We have basically a GPS in it that tells the computer roughly where you are in the world and some information on your emails and calendar and so on. That's the extent of the context that we have. So that GPS gave us a huge number of the applications that we think of today and were invented on the smartphone. Suddenly think of a computer having 100 times more information about what you were trying to do in the world, understanding who you were talking to, when the last time you communicated was, what you're looking at, what's of interest to you. We know from technologies like eye tracking, not just what's in front of you, literally what are you reading or what are you paying attention to in the world. And so how does the computer use that information to create new interfaces and experience that are contextual and based on that information? And that's really the power we get from devices like this.
So one of the things I saw an article a few weeks ago that was really interesting about a bunch of scientists at the same time as Cambridge Analytica was using sort of data from Facebook for ill, they were using it for psychological research. And they basically worked out using some machine learning, some deep learning, machine learning, and AI from the way you communicated on Facebook, your emotional state of mind. Now, this is both deeply disturbing and super powerful depending on what's done with this data, right? So these researchers were actually using it for PTSD. So they were trying to figure out, PTSD victims go to therapy sort of once a week or once every other week, and they talk to their therapist, and you're kind of getting a snapshot of whatever's happening at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. But if you had signals from the data, both the physical data from wearables, from what they're doing, but also where their eyes are going, what they're reading, what they're thinking over a longer period of time, you could actually get a better clinical view of them and also possibly deliver content to them to help them manage their situation. Talk about that a little bit. Like, how would you see yourself fitting in that sort of emotional interface versus just physical?
Well, one of the really interesting things we're seeing right now is that this area broadly of, quote, wearable computing, smart glasses, augmented reality, whatever term you want to use, this is coming. And every major technology company is doing something here, whether it's Facebook or Apple or Google, they're all working on products here and will launch things in the years to come. They have business models that are built around essentially monetizing attention. Right? We think of the business models for the big internet companies, it's largely selling you ads and trying to maximize the time that you spend in those apps and services. And so now project that forward to a device that can literally put information in front of your eyes all day, can understand what you're doing, has an incredible amount of data. There's a perverse incentive with those existing business models today. And so one version of the future that has some of those companies kind of putting these products out and winning in that category is one that I'm not comfortable with personally as a consumer, where that just gets extended further. And the approach we take as a company that's coming in, we build glasses. We have no business model in selling your attention for advertising and monetizing eyeballs. But being able to approach it from a fresh perspective and say, how do we architect this from day one to be in a privacy-conscious perspective and use that information to improve your experience and actually give you almost superhuman abilities out in the world, really designed around how do we use that in a way that's going to benefit the user without the perverse incentive of saying, I need to sell you more ads from your information. And so taking that from day one, I think, is a really important ingredient of this next version of computing. Personally, I don't want to be wearing the glasses in 5 years that are, the big company X glasses that are there to sell me more ads as I go through my day. I want the glasses that are there to make my day better and support me and make me a more effective person in the world.
So it's funny, Barney and I last night at dinner had this fantastic conversation about how Barney hacked a satellite that was out in space. It was his own satellite. he had written some code, someone had created a bug, and he debugged an asteroid from space. But this is a benevolent bit of hacking, but what about, like, in 5 years, is someone going to hack my glasses and throw up a bunch of content I'm not very interested in the middle of a meeting? Like, how do we protect our interfaces from non-benevolent actors?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you think of situations, you're driving, for example, right? Do you want information thrown up when you're driving? And so we really have to think about those design decisions and implications from day one. It's an important design tenet is understanding the most important real estate and attention that you have is literally in front of your eyes. And so how do you think about designing a system, designing interfaces, UIs, et cetera, from day one that are respectful of attention? That's what we do today. So the product it's on for 5 seconds, on for 10 seconds, and it's off hundreds of times throughout the day. Even built features, like 2 weeks ago, we announced something called conversation detection. So we literally understand, are you talking to somebody right now? Unless something is super important and you need to know right now, we'll wait, and no notifications, no information coming in until there's a natural break or pause. And so it's really being,
I have a question about this. So if you know I'm having a conversation, how do you distinguish between me having a conversation with the person in the car with me and me singing along with the radio?
Version 2 of that feature, that's a great question. Yeah.
The reason I asked this question is Schematic, a firm I founded a few years ago, we were hired by BMW Design Works, and thankfully the NDA just expired, so I can now tell you this. So they had built this terrible interface where you had a wheel in the center of your BMW and a screen that had no interface that had a relationship with a spinning motion. So you had to sort of work out while you're driving a vehicle at 65 miles an hour down the highway what this did on the screen here. And of course, the screen's in the middle of the car, and you're supposed to be looking ahead. The most dangerous interface ever. And so they wanted us to solve this. And I said, well, first of all, why is everything happening on this big screen in the middle of the car? You should put heads up. And they're like, well, that would be in front of the windshield. And I said, well, it can't be any more dangerous than looking down here and trying to figure this thing out. And so we built and if any of you saw, there was a series of BMWs that had this heads-up display. It was literally just a little projector shining up on the screen. And the safety factor of that was massive. Like when we did all the testing and the user testing, it was off the charts. The problem is the regulators, they were like they didn't believe this was safer. So they actually banned it in like 15 countries. So I'm wondering, how do you deal with the education process of teaching markets, consumers, and regulators that actually this is a safe interface, or do you view that as sort of the people building on your platforms?
That driving one is a great example, right? So if you put our glasses on today, you get in a car, you go for a drive, we turn them off. We say driving mode, don't do anything, display's off. But actually, this would be far safer, and numerous studies have shown, even with products like Google's Glass, which is very not optimized for driving, displays up and to the right, you have to look up here, lots of problems. It was far safer than looking down at a smartphone mounted on a holder at your navigation while you're in the car. And so you think of designing interfaces like this in the right way that understand you're driving. I'm not going to show you an email to read, but your turn-by-turn directions of make a left turn up ahead, far safer not looking down at a unit. And the question on regulators is a great one, because that, immediately we say, oh, technology in the car, oh my God, that's bad, right? Looking at your cell phone is highly dangerous, and it is. I think the process is really getting out in front of that. So we are already today working on formal safety studies, for example, on distracted driving and what are the right design principles. We are working with regulators to actually make sure over the next 5 years, as legislation gets put in place, that they're educated and they understand the implications and how to do this properly. We also don't want people to build products that are not designed and are not safe for driving and kind of taint the industry. And so we really have to get out in front, I think, and work with everybody in this space to understand what are the principles going to be, what are the right design rules, what does the science and the data say around the right information, the right interface, et cetera, and do it in a great way. So.
Look, if I had your product on Monday, I probably wouldn't have a broken foot because I was texting while getting out of the cab, which is how I slipped it up. I want to talk about two more things before we're done. I want to talk about, so as a designer, we think a lot about the visual language and the interaction language of a platform. And so you're creating this new platform of a device in your finger and the glasses. How do you wrestle with those things, both as a platform side and then how to educate the community of people who are going to design and build products and software on top of your platform?
The short answer is, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, we didn't know.
Right.
We started off, and there really hadn't been a heads-up display, a pair of smart glasses that real consumers actually wore and used in public. So there wasn't our smartphone today.
What about Google Glass?
Say again, there hadn't been a real device people use and wear in public every day. Smartphone designs today, we have a set of UI elements, right? We have buttons, and we have back buttons, and we have an app layout, and we have an architecture that exists. That didn't exist here. And so we were wrong on a whole number of dimensions when we first started working on this. The first prototypes that we were wearing in public 2 years ago, prior to releasing the product every single day, we were doing things like showing long-form emails with 15 lines of text out here, like at any given time when they come in. We were We had an information architecture that was sort of all like a giant vertical list you would just scroll through. In practice, very quickly we got out there, we started playing with it. It didn't make sense, and it was really a process of just iteration and going through what is the language going to be, how much information is the right amount, how long should it be on, when should we show you something versus not show you? How do we understand the context of what the user is doing to inform what's going to be relevant and easy to glance at? And all of those things were just not known 2 years ago, and we're still figuring out today. One of the big goals in launching the product now is that there are literally real people. I just ran into somebody on the street last week that are wearing this product every single day in public, using it, and they're telling us what they love about it, but more so what they hate about it, what doesn't work. And so there's so much learning still to happen. This is like the Apple One of this new category. We don't have 30 years of history of having refined the interfaces and so on. That's happening right now live.
Great. So 20 years from now, what is the biggest innovation development around human-computer interface that you see then? I mean, glasses are pervasive. You guys have won. But what's the next thing?
I think it's the extension of that. So glasses being pervasive is just the first step towards that. I mean, the real power, as we talked about, is how do you actually give people the benefits we get from computing, but in a way that's just seamlessly integrated with the world. Really invisible technology supporting us and almost making us, in a way, superhuman. We think about for the past number of decades, we've had this sort of symbiosis of man and machine. We talk about being able to use the abilities of the computer to help us do things, solve problems, et cetera. Well, at some point, there's this line between us as humans and technology, and right now it's like this box on the table that I use, and it can do some things, I can do some things, but the powerful idea here is this close merging and coupling of technology. Suddenly it's not, oh, the computer knows something, I just look at something and I understand it more than I would innately as human. And so it's almost an evolution of us as humans, of human ability that happens as we actually couple technology to be a seamless part that's just interwoven with our days. And we think that's incredibly powerful as that happens to actually make us, in some ways, more human, but more powerful than we've ever been in just understanding and actually actioning on the world around us.
It's funny, as a 12-year-old hacker, I viewed computers as the most amazing secret club that I was in that no one else could be in. But that was because I had bothered to go and learn the language of computers, and I knew all the secrets. And at Razorfish, we had this line, which is, no one should have to know any secrets to use the tool of computing. And so I think congratulations on taking, helping us take a big step towards that goal of machines disappearing into the background and just simply extending our reach as human beings.
Thank you very much, and thanks, CDL.